Our core values: Christ-centric worship, community service. The last one, Christian education that transforms the world with the gospel. We heard the education report this morning, and we heard Ms. Holland say that enrollment is open. And my child is already enrolled. What about yours? And I want to agree with her. Come and see us to see how we can help you. I also want to say, Happy Easter. I want to say Happy Easter. I want to say Jesus is risen. I want to say that the tomb could not hold him. I want to say that death has no power over him. I want to say that the forces of darkness are already, not to be, but are already defeated. I want to say we serve a God who has already won. Now, if you want to be on the losing team, you're always welcome to do that. But we already know who's won the big Stanley Cup champion of the universe. We've been talking this quarter about beating with the heartbeat, this year about beating with the heartbeat of Jesus. We've been talking this quarter about big problems and even bigger emotions. And when I think about big problems, and I think about big emotions, could there be a bigger problem than the death of the Master? Could there be a bigger problem than the death of the Savior? Could there be a more emotional situation in the whole universe than what happened at Calvary? And here's the thing about what happened at Calvary. Here's the thing about the resurrection. Here's the thing about the cross. It's good news. It's saving news. It's real power. But morning does not come before night. But joy does come in the morning. And I want to take some time and to focus on a couple characters of the cross, a couple people going into this resurrection. We will get to the resurrection, but I want to talk about this big emotion for a moment that I didn't think about until a couple months ago when me and Pastor Cosley were planning sermons. The road to resurrection is covered with abandonment. Now, I know that some of you were abandoned, and some of you know what abandonment is. I know that some of you were born into abandonment, and abandoned in the most fundamental spots and at the most fundamental time. And I know that some of you chose people who they chose you, but ended up abandoned. I know that some of you were like me, the fat kid in middle school, who whenever they picked teams was abandoned until you were the last choice. I know that some of you may be feeling abandoned right now as There are changes happening and jobs being lost. Abandonment is a true emotion on the way to the resurrection. Joy comes in the morning, but the morning can't come until the night has passed. And it's easy, and I think that people will want to skip right to the tomb, and people will want to skip this weekend in their sermons, be they on Saturday or be they on Sunday. People will want to skip right to what happens in the tomb. But I think we will miss the depths of the story that could transform us in this moment as we deal with our own big problems and big emotions. Now, it is abandonment. And feeling abandoned and feeling rejected, it probably is my big emotional trigger. When I think about abandonment, I think about the day that my father came into my room at age 13 and took the video game controller out of my hand and told me he would no longer be living in our house. Abandonment is a real core emotion that once you've experienced it, it's almost like it's a little piece of death. Do you know that death in a broken world is actually good news? You may say, well, Pastor, this is where you lost me in this sermon. I want to remind you of the words of one of the greatest apologists of all time, C.S. Lewis. For C.S. Lewis reminds us on Easter weekend that nothing that hasn't died can ever be resurrected. And so resurrection actually requires death. And if I am to be the born-again Christian, if I am to be the resurrected Christian, if I am the one to have Christ in me, then I too must not deny my big problems, my big emotions, and my big fears. I want to talk this morning about what the road to the cross was like for Mary, the mother of Jesus, and John, the youngest disciple of Jesus. Probably 16 or 17 years old. You could be called to be a disciple, to follow the rabbinical code as early as 15, but you were not allowed to speak. You were not allowed to be a person of influence until 30, which is why Jesus starts his ministry at 30. The Jesus movement is a young movement. Do you hear me this morning? The Jesus movement is a young movement. It's not for the gray hairs like me. I mean, it is. But the power of the Jesus movement is in the young people. The power of the Jesus movement is in a 15-year-old John and a 30-year-old Jesus. Jesus, just the age to allow it to be called rabbi. John, just the age be allowed to be called disciple. And there was a special bond that formed instantly because Jesus was just coming into his own of the age where he could be a rabbi. And John was just coming into his own to be of the age that he could be a disciple. And there they were, the youngest leaders in Israel who would change our world. But the truth of the matter is, without Mary, nothing gets done. In my studies this week, I was studying deeply into their backstories, deeply into their history, and the Hebrew word tameh came to me. Tameh. The Hebrew word for tameh comes from Leviticus, comes out of Levitical code. The Hebrew word for tameh is to put it as clean and clear. You heard that, right? Clean and clear. Is dirty. Mary was dirty. And she could not escape the narrative of being dirty. We have words that we don't speak about in this room to explain what tameh means. But everyone in Palestine knew the word tameh. But I will bet, as Mary is going through the market, the ladies in the checkout line walk by quietly and go, tameh. Look at the little tameh. I bet, even in the synagogue, the women at the back are like, they're letting tameh sit at the front? I even bet the little children playing in the street knew Mary's disgrace. You see, you can't live in Palestine. You can't be a Jew at Second Temple time. You can't live in that culture and think a simple church transfer or synagogue transfer down the street will wash tameh off of you. Some of you have been in churches where they do math very well. Oh, why was Mary called tameh? Because she was bad, because she was unclean, because she was unfaithful? No, Mary was called tameh because she was obedient to God. But when you think about abandonment and Mary, think about this. Every snicker from the back of the synagogue, every head turn in the market, and you know how some men are. Always trying for something with someone with a reputation. She had a lot of abandonment. So thank God for Joseph. But you know what they said about him? He should have put that tameh away. We know that she was faithful. We know that she was godly. We know that she was revered. We know that she was of special favor. But this is what I want to tell you today, is what people say about you is not what you are. What people think they have the evidence about you for. You know, I get some notes on my desk sometimes. Some emails that come in sometimes. What people think about you. Hurts. It's a bite of abandonment. But Mary, even if she must give birth in a stable and have bites of abandonment her whole life, she will be faithful, even unto the cross. I mean, they kicked Jesus out of his own synagogue in Nazareth. They were faithful Sabbath keepers. No matter what was said about them, no matter how many times the ruler of the synagogue asked the math questions like, when were you married? How old is this little baby Jesus? What do you think it was like for the brothers and sisters of Jesus? Yes, he had them, and we're not getting into all that today, but what do you think it was like for them? Do you think they got made fun of? Do you think they heard the other children in the streets calling their mom Tamay? It was common in the synagogue for them to look over at Jesus and say, my, isn't that the carpenter's son? And sometimes they were even much more explicit. Sometimes they were like this. The religious, the elite, the established were not born out of sexual immorality. We have one God. We have one Father. Even God. They would use God's name. They would dare invoke God's name to shame a woman of faith in their own tradition. People will do a lot of things in the name of God that have nothing to do with God. Little bites of abandonment make up big holes in people's hearts. So much so that it affected Jesus' whole family. Now, I want you to know this. I want you to understand this. If you don't deal with your abandonment issues, and if you are one who takes little bites of abandonment out of people, I want you to understand it will affect your family. In fact, in John 7, verse 5, we're told that Jesus' own brothers did not believe in him. It was bad enough that they could do math. It was bad enough they heard the words in the street. But now this illegitimate child, which are different words for that we also don't use in the sanctuary, now this illegitimate child thinks he's going to morally teach others. And he's letting them imply that he could be the Messiah. How is this for a big bite of abandonment? His own brothers turned their back on Jesus. In fact, don't you dare think it did not affect Jesus. Because he himself would say, "Who is my mother? Who is my brother? Who is my sister?" Those who believe in God and hold on to that. If you are abandoned, please know, we will see in this sermon, God is making a new family unit. But here's the thing. This is what Mary had going for her. She had a supportive husband until he passed, which probably happened. She had the memory of the angel Gabriel telling her that this is no ordinary son. She had Genesis 3 and the promise that a Messiah would crush the head of the serpent. She had Daniel 9 and the promise that there would be a Prince of Peace. And eventually she would have Isaiah 53. She would hold on to her Bible. She would hold on to her promises. She would hold on to them, and she would watch her son. She could take the bites of abandonment because she could see the truth of the prophecy being fulfilled before her eyes. And then there's John, just a boy. And I'm going to suggest to you something you probably might not hear a lot, but there's evidence for this in the text. John and James are probably not poor fishermen. It's probably an established business, and it's probably economically viable. Why would I say that? Well, because one, John was able to get up with his brother, a few years older than him, and follow Jesus. And let me tell you, Jesus was not paying the bill. They were not Peter, who had been working and establishing a career. Not only that, the text itself actually indicates that they were people who had servants. The text itself says, and immediately he, this is Jesus, called them, which is John and James, and they left their father Zebedee in the boat with their what? Any of you got any hired servants? I don't. They had hired servants. And they followed Jesus. Now, the thing about John, he was young, he was impulsive, he was a go-getter. He probably came from a family where he was used to having a little bit of privilege, a little bit of service. Like don't get me wrong, fishermen were not rich, but of that class, they were probably the middle class at least, because they had servants. And the thing about John is he had a little bit of that, we talked about it the other week. What were we talking about? Oh, righteous indignation. Once John and James turned to Jesus and they were like, listen, we have given everything up to follow you and we don't like what these Samaritans are doing. Call fire down from heaven and devour them. He was idealistic, but sometimes out of turn. There was a reason him and his elder brother got the nickname Sons of Thunder. What I love about James and John, I don't know why, but in my mental imagery, whenever I read Sons of Thunder, I just see two bikers. Big muscles, big beards, I love mama on my arm. They're big, tough mama boys. Used to their privilege, used to their parents fighting their battles. In fact, they had the gall to go to Jesus one day and say, oh, Mama, we can't face him. Mama, can you please go talk to the master for us? We're big and we're bad and we want to be his right and his left hand. But they're too big and bad to even ask for themselves. They too sent their anonymous notes with their mom. Usually it's the people who are the toughest, who think they're the toughest, who are the cowards. And Jesus just looked at their mama and said, "You boys aren't tough enough. Can they drink the cup that I'm going to drink? Can they be baptized with the baptism that I'm going to have?" They're all talk. They got no walk. Let them walk the talk. And then we'll see where they belong in the kingdom. But it's interesting that that's the case because every major event that happens in Jesus' life, John and James and Peter are there. They are the three favorites of Jesus. And if it's at the raising of Jairus' daughter from the dead, or if it's at the transfiguration of Moses and Elijah, or if it's at the Garden of Gethsemane, where Jesus is sweating blood, crying out to his Father. Or if it's telling the secrets at the end of the world on the Mount of Olives. John is privileged. John is invited. In fact, we were told in the upper room on the night that Jesus was betrayed, John was the beloved. It actually says that John, at that communion, laid his head on the bosom of Jesus. In Semitic Hebrew culture, this meant they were family. And John is quite fond in his writings of referring to himself as the disciple whom Jesus loved. Oh, I wish you would take that privilege. I wish you would fill the bites of abandonment with that privilege. That privilege was not just for John. John just had the gumption to own it. People are always coming for you. Hear me. People are always coming for you. People are always coming for you. The road to resurrection is filled with abandonment. Bites of abandonment will always be taken out of you. But you counter that out with the absolute undeniable reality that you are the disciple of whom Jesus loves. No one can take that privilege away. Not even yourself. And so they came and they took Jesus. And everyone abandoned him. Including, yes, John. The road to the resurrection is a road we know well. It's a road we all have ran on. And they all left him and fled. when you have big problems, when you have big emotions, your tendency will be to leave Jesus. Hear me. When you have big problems and you have big emotions, your tendency is to leave Jesus. And you won't even know you have left him. This is the moment you must call on the title of being the disciple whom Jesus loved. Nothing else will get you there. Even Peter will deny Jesus 3 times in a row. And at the last time, right to his face. Oh, don't tell me how many years you've been in the church. Don't tell me what positions you've served. Don't tell me what accolades you've been given. Tell me of your loyalty, sinking your heart to the heart of Jesus. Because abandonment is certain in a broken world. And sometimes people don't even know what they're doing when they're doing it. The Bible doesn't tell us how Mary found out Jesus was arrested. The Bible doesn't tell us how Mary found out that the ultimate sentence had been handed to him. But remember, she had held on to the hopes of Gabriel and the story that Gabriel had told her. Remember, she had held on to the promise in Genesis 3. He was going to be the one who stamped out the serpent's head. But now he's going to the cross. Her very dreams, the words an angel from God gave her, are abandoning her. And John, young and idealistic, had ran away. Oh, he's such a big, tough guy, a son of thunder, ran away from a temple guard. The Bible doesn't tell us when. But at some point, John began to run again. And he didn't run from the crowd. He didn't run from the temple guards. No, he ran towards the crowd, and he ran towards not simple Jewish temple guards, but now he was a man. He ran towards Roman centurions. He had to find his Jesus. He had to see his Jesus. He was about to lose his Jesus. At your greatest points of loss, you better run. Not away, but towards the problem. Because I'm going to promise you one thing. I don't know when it's coming. I don't know if it's coming. I don't know if you've been through it. I don't know if you've lived it. You know what I'm saying is true. I don't know if it's still coming for you. I know you've been through it once, twice, 3 times, and there's a 4th time coming. I don't know. But when your greatest problem comes, I can promise you one thing. Jesus is not wherever you run away to. He's in the middle of the problem. So run into that problem. For there, you will find Jesus. This is the Jesus we have. This is the Jesus we preach. This is the Jesus we worship. We choose a Jesus who wants us to run towards him in problems. And guess what? They run into each other. You don't know who's a part of your story. You don't know who you're going to run into, who's going to help you. You don't know who else is suffering the same thing you're suffering, and you just don't see it. How would she see this little boy that runs around following her son is going to be a part of a new world, a part of a new order, a part of a new family, a part of a new way, a part of a new religion? How could this boy who has his own daddy and his own mommy think that this woman, this Tamay, was a part of the comfort of his abandonment? At some point, in somewhere on that road, not only did they find each other, but they find Jesus. And I'm going to tell you something right now. This is the big problem right here. This is the big problem right here. Please, 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 please. You must get the big problem. The big problem is Mary has done what's right, and John has done what's right, and they have ran into the problem, and they have found the solution. Jesus. That's good, right? But here's what Jesus tells them that he's going to tell you. I know your problem. I'm here for your problem. But my course doesn't change. I know what you want. And I am not in the business of giving people what they want. I am in the business of giving people what they need. And you want me to stay. And you want me to die, Mary, after you. And John, you're but 17 and maybe 18, and you want me to stay until you're 30 and be a part of your rabbi ordination. And I could do that. He has the power, right? But all would be lost. And so he actually is saying, are you finally tough enough for the tomb? Church, are you finally tough enough for the tomb? Because your life and your big problems and your bigger emotions have to die. Because C.S. Lewis is right. Nothing that doesn't die can ever be resurrected. If you want resurrected solutions, if you want resurrected emotions, you must be willing to hear the hard words of Jesus. Standing by the cross of Jesus were his mother and his mother's sister, and Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. That's a lot of Marys and a lot of Thomays. Jesus will always be found with the dirty. When Jesus saw his mother and the disciple, what disciple? What disciple? Look at the screen. What disciple? What disciple? What disciple? You! You're the disciple he loves. That he doesn't spare the tough news from. Because light only comes in the morning. He said to the woman, "Behold, your son." Then he looked at John and he said, oh, went too far. He said, "Behold, your mother." And from that hour, hear this part. From that hour, hear this part. From that hour, real family, fortifying families is the core value I didn't mention in the beginning because I want to mention it now. It's in that moment that Jesus redefines the word family. And it's in that moment that family is no longer about who you're biologically related to. It is in that moment that family is not just about who you're married to. It is in that moment that family is not just about where you grew up. It is in that moment that Jesus says, real family is about those who believe together. For isn't that what he said when he rebuked the people calling Mary his mama, who is my mom and who is my brother and who is my sister? Those who believe and do the will of God. It is in the crisis when you don't run from Jesus, but you run into the crisis. And I know this from experience. It's where you find your real family. Behold, your mother. From that hour, the little boy John took the old widow Mary into his home. But it does not prevent the problem. They're both going through the problem. When Jesus had received the sour wine, he said, "It is finished." And then he bowed his head and gave up the spirit. No. Running to Jesus does not take away the problem, but it gives you everything you need to get through the problem. And if you could see what Jesus sees, abandonment in a broken world is an opportunity for resurrection. George Vandeman, the man who founded and was the first telecaster or host of It Is Written, said about this moment, the Sabbath when Jesus was in the tomb was the longest Sabbath ever on earth. No, it didn't have the most hours. It had the most abandonment. No one was thinking, by the way, in church tradition, the Sabbath, the Easter Sabbath, is called Holy Sabbath. Because it's the moment we're waiting for the miracle. There was no one thinking about the resurrection. There was no one planning the resurrection. In fact, we're told they went to the tomb not to look to see if Jesus had been resurrected, but to finish getting the body ready. You see, it's only going to be at the moment. Please hear me. I'm going to wrap up, I know. It's only going to be at the moment. Come on, follow me with this. It's only going to be at the moment that you give up that Jesus stands up. And the reason sometimes Jesus is not standing up in your life, come on now, is you're not giving up. This Holy Sabbath, this Easter Sabbath, remember, nothing that hasn't died will ever be resurrected. But there is a morning, and the morning is coming. And sometimes all you can do is hold on to those Jesus has put you with in the night. And wait for him to stand up in the morning. And when he stands up in the morning, it will all make sense. You see, it is only through the portals of the empty tomb that we see the new family. Listen to me, church. It is only through the portals of the tomb that we see the new family. Listen to me, church. It is only through the portals of the tomb that we see that family is not flesh and blood. It is only through the portals of the tomb that we see that family is those who believe with each other against all odds. And family would never be the same again. It would be about believing, supporting, and loving one another. I cannot imagine, the Bible does not tell us what it was like in John's home. He brought the fish to Mary, and she cleaned them. And she cooked them. Maybe John read from Psalms 21, 22, and 23 that prophesied about Jesus. And maybe Mary told John about what she saw in the baby Jesus, about those Psalms. All I know for certain is John himself wrote, I can't tell you everything because there's too much to say. But what I do know, the new church, the new family, the new place to belong, had both John and Mary in an upper room praying with the other believers when the Holy Spirit came upon. Listen to this. When Jesus talked about being the first and the last, Mary was the first to ever see the face of Jesus. John was the last of the 12 alive, abandoned again on the island of Patmos as the book of Revelation opens. So he says, I see a new heaven. I see a new earth where there's no more sickness, where there's no more dying, where there's no more pain, where there's no more cancer, where there's no more heart attacks, where there's no more abandonment. He says this, I looked and there was no more sea, because he's on an island, separated from those he loves by what? The sea. John can see past the sea because he ran into his problems, found the solution, and clung on to them.